Hello. Moving on. Stuff's gonna get really cool, for real. Yeah. All right. So there's a composition in that file called lights intro. And when you open it up, it's just a bunch of gray. However, there's two layers in there. Two layers, one called floor, one called back wall. So they're out there. They happen to be the same value of gray. What color of gray are they? They're it's close to 50% gray. It's like 1 pixel off. I just guessed. That's pretty good. Um, You'll understand the importance of gray value and lighting here shortly. But let's get in, have a real careful, slow, general approach to lighting, and then let's get after it. And that's where the cool stuff happens. So this is basically a room. It doesn't have any walls, but you would never know it from just this one default camera view. There's no camera in here yet, even. But you have to always remember when you're working in a 3D space, when you set anything in to a 3D, attribute, then you have to know that there is a default camera. You can't control it. It just sits right here. And that's the same thing with lights. As soon as you turn on any layer to be three-dimensional, it just says, okay, cool. So then we've got the default ambient light, and there will be an even cast of light everywhere. Kind of like if you walk outside midday on an overcast day, slightly overcast, like not dark, gloomy day, but slightly overcast, where everything is sort of just like, you're like looking around going, yeah, everything all kind of looks evenly lit. There's no real shadows or anything like that. That's our ambient light. And the reason that I referred to it being an overcast day is because the sun, which is our source of light, has a direction in which it is shining light into our world. I keep looking at the screen like it's you, but you're up here. The clouds diffuse that light and spread it more evenly. So sometimes when filming a scene, the cinematographer would really just love a slightly overcast day, because that starts to help dampen harsh light, harsh shadows, whatnot. And so if you've ever seen outdoor on location film sites, they'll have huge flags up, and the flags are things that either block light or diffuse light. So if it's diffusion, it's giant white panels of a fabric, and it sort of just softens that a little bit. So ambient light is just sort of a universal spread light. That is the default light when you go into 3D. If we think back about the Bernie shot, everything is lit. There's no shadows. It's just like front, back, sides, doesn't matter. There's just light everywhere. So if we want to start to really sculpt and deal with the space that we're working with in a more meaningful way, we have to include lights as separate elements in this composition. They are found under the layer menu, just like we find our solids and our cameras. You can see it's the third item down. Also has that great shortcut, Command Option Shift L. And that's going to open up your light settings. And it's going to say, all right, what are you looking for? And also, what do you want to call it? And so I'm going to call this first one ambient, which is fine. And then the type. So here are the 4 light varieties that After Effects offers you: a parallel light, spotlight, point light, ambient. We're going to start with the ambient just because it's kind of like the place where you would normally start. Whether you're working in After Effects or you're working in any 3D modeling and animation software, you kind of want to set the initial tone. What is the ambient light in a room before you start bringing in your other types of lights to do the real heavy work? So we're going to choose ambient. The color for now is, don't let it be just plain white. There is no pure white light out there. Like even the cool LEDs now, they seem like they're pretty close, but they're just not. So this is a chance for us just to sort of be like, okay, yeah, well, you want warmer? Do you want cooler? You sort of pick your palette. I would never go in. It's not true. I might choose a color that is something a little extreme if I needed it. But like generally, I either start with a yellow warm light or a cool blue. I'm just going to start with a warmer one for now. It's more my thing. My wife likes the cool, pure white lights, and I like a comforting light. I should turn my phone off. So I'm going to choose something that's still close to white, but it's going to just be slightly influenced by a little bit of color. So like not going far from, this is absolute white in the corner, top left corner, but I'm just going to give it a little bit, and I'm going to hit OK. And then intensity 100, and the rest of it's fine. Bam. Now I see that gray world has just warmed up a little bit, and that's fine. You can go with any shade that you want. When can we Zoom with you? Well, not now. I'm recording a video. Oh, that reminds me. I have pizza in the oven. Hang on. Pause. Pizza! Thanks, Bridge Pizza. Chicken bacon. That's going to be really good, but not right now because I'm in the middle of something. Get that out of the dog's reach. This was just poor timing. I just got excited about starting this video, so I did it while I had pizza in the oven. Okay, now, ambient light. The only thing that changes is a slight tinge of warmth. Still don't see any sort of relation to the depth of the floor, where the wall is, and so on. And if I bring in an element now, it'll also just kind of take on a cast of what we see with this ambient light. So I do want to bring in Bernie. So I'm going to bring Bernie in. Bernie needs to be 3D. The only layers that are affected by light can be 3D layers. A 2D layer will not accept light or any of its properties. It won't cast shadows. It won't take color. So Bernie is now 3D. And maybe I'll just move Bernie back a little bit. Back into that space, just so he's not too much of a front runner. And then I might just make sure that Bernie is on the ground. I'm lowering him until I start to see the toes disappear. You can kind of see the toes start to disappear as you're cutting into that horizontal layer. The other great way to look at this would be in a front view. Front view shows me no perspective whatsoever, but it gives me an understanding of where all these layers are hanging out. So I can see that even my back wall is not actually touching my floor. So Bernie, if I move you up or down, obviously there's some pixel information that I didn't delete because that's not a clean version of Bernie. It's pretty trashy. In fact, I even did some weird painting. That's why his hair looks so funny. I just didn't want to spend a lot of time into it because I didn't need to. My back wall, I can see that it is up rather high. I'm going to hit position. And I'm going to lower that until its bottom edge meets the floor. You can see the floor. The floor is that red line at the bottom. But since we're looking at this from the front with no perspective at all, you don't see anything that resembles distance or spatial relationships. So it's a really good lesson to learn about just that organization of space. So there you go. Now I'm going to go back to active camera. And I'm gonna keep my lights on top. I like to keep audio files at the bottom of my layer stack, and I like to keep lights and camera at the top. And then everything else in between is all of your images, your layers, and stuff like that. It's a good way for you to start to think about like organization and the sandwich that is your work, and so you know where to go right away to find those sorts of things. Now I'm going to go back and introduce a new light. So if I go to Layer, New Light, and this time instead of choosing Ambient, I'm going to choose a Spotlight. And the Spotlight, I might just leave the same color. That's fine. Intensity, I'm going to leave at 100. And Cone Angle, I think defaults at 90 and Cone Feather at 50, so that's all fine. We won't worry about fall off. Cast shadows is interesting because typically we will want shadows, but not always. So they give it to you right off the bat, default unchecked. But if I were to say cast shadows and then commit to this, and the next time I come in and choose another light, it'll be checked. So it's just one of those things that sort of looks at what you're doing while you work and is guessing what your preferences are. I'm gonna turn cast shadows on because I do want to talk about those and make sure that we understand how they work, because it's not just as easy as turning on one button. You have to turn on several. So I'm just gonna call this spot 1. And wow, like yes, things suddenly changed. And what is now obvious is that the spotlight is affecting the back wall and Bernie much more than it is the floor. And that's all about several things. Most of the attributes that are there, which is the intensity, its cone angle, what was the other one? And the feather. Feather is not a huge deal. So what we need to understand is that this light is now a 3D object. It sits in this space. And because it's a spotlight, it's a directional light, and it wants to throw light in a certain direction, just like you were rigging lights for a theatrical performance on a stage, okay, in a theater. So what I would like to do is I'd like to change my view to 2 views so I can get a little better idea of what this light's doing and what its arrangement looks like. I always like to look at my active camera on the left. I don't know why. But on this one, I might change it to the right view for now, just so I can kind of understand where things are. It's really hard to see that bottom line, but I think you can see it. So if I click on my spotlight, you're going to see it in both views, which is interesting because you don't see your camera in the active camera view, but you do see the lights. That's because they're players, not the recorder. And the recorder just needs to be the thing that you would expect if you put your eye up to the viewfinder of the camera and trying to see what you're looking at here. So with the light selected, I can start to see, oh yeah, okay, this is its position in Z space and in Y. It doesn't really show me X. That would be what the active camera would be for, so any lateral movements are obvious here. That also shows me what cone angle looks like. And then other attributes, lights have point of interest too, just like the camera if you have a 2-node camera. But you can't turn off the point of interest on a light. So if I open up the attributes for light, I have transform, and those transform attributes are point of interest, position, and then the rotations. And then it has light options, and those light options deal with a few of the things that we saw in the window when we first made this light. So intensity, what the color is, cone angle, and feather. So intensity is just like, how bright is this light? So I can turn it down, and as I turn it down, you start to see that we get closer and closer to that original ambient sort of flatness. I'm going to put it at like 80%. So you can change the color here if you want to. And then the cone angle, definitely scrub that thing left to right, and you'll see something that would be more along the lines of what you would expect with a spotlight. You'd start to see more of that edge and how it's casting itself in that environment. So just for now, I might leave it somewhere around the 50s. And then your cone feather is the softness of that edge. So if I go a softness or feather of 0, I'm going to have pretty dramatic edge contrast with that light. And I can go all the way up to 100. I think I can go past, no, I can't go past 100. Some weird attributes you can go past 100%, which you're like, well, you're not supposed to be able to go past 100%, but you can. So super soft, it defaults at 50, so it's just sort of like visible or right in your face. Spotlight, bam. I'm just going to kind of put it back in its 50s. We won't deal about fall off radius or distance and stuff like that right now. Cast shadows is checked, as we knew that earlier. But before I even get into more of those attributes, what I would love to do is look at what the point of interest is. Point of interest, I'm just going to grab with my hand first and just sort of move it. And you can see that the light's panning up, the light's panning down. I can't pan it left or right here because on the right view, you're really only seeing Y and Z. So if I wanted to pan the light to the right or left, I would use the one that I can see in my active camera view. Typically, a good sculpt of light has some angular sense to it. It adds a little more tension and dramatic response to how we interpret space. There are times when you might need something spot directly on or straight down or something. It all kind of depends on the feel you're trying to do. So this little guy is similar to the point of interest of the camera. It has a little circle with a couple of dots, and I can grab any of those attributes in my timeline and move them too, right? But sometimes it makes just more sense to kind of grab it on screen and watch those results change as you interact with it. Now, the light itself does have the different values of position, Y, Z, and then somewhere here is X, left and right. And notice that as you move them with an arrow, the point of interest moves with them. However, if you move any of those values in position on your timeline, if I say I want to move my X, the point of interest does not travel with it. So there's this weird connection of point of interest and position graphically in the composition window where they are married. But if you use the bonk, I just bonked the microphone. But if you use the attributes in the timeline, then it does break that. And you can see that I'm panning my light from left to right, or maybe, up and down. And if I wanted to have like a straight down sort of more angular light, then I can do that a couple of ways. I can use these values and try to like get it to where I want it. Or you can grab that little tiny box. I'm going to zoom in on that thing so we can see it. Oh man, it's so hard to get it. Just spot on. Nope, that's X and Y. I want all of them. Usually they go away. This whole thing with the lit up drives me batty. There we go. You kind of have to click off and back on. So like, as you can see, now I'm shining straight down on the floor and the wall is not getting anything until I point it further back. So it takes a little bit of futzing, and I really encourage you to futz because it's the futzing that gets you to understand the nuances of how this thing is set up. So futz with it a little bit and try to see if you can find that one point where you can move it in any direction without it being locked to an X or a Y or a Z. And then you can do the same thing. I'm going to click off of it just so I don't have to do it. On the active camera, so like there's a straight down spot. Well, it's not quite straight down. I'd have to come over here now and move it like that. Well, it's doing some weird spinning stuff. But it's in front of Bernie. So then it's up to me to say, all right, well, it needs to go, further back in my Z. Well, That's not working because it's moving everything. See, it just gets hard. It gets hard. Y. So we're going to go back on the Y, and then I have to track this thing, and then I have to go with my Z. Warning, layers. It's fine. I have to orient this thing properly so it makes more sense. Now I can move it over. I'm almost over, Bernie. Now I got to move my Y further back. Okay, so you can see as I move kind of past Bernie or in front of him, he's picking up different light and I'm hitting him. But pretty much I am almost directly on top of Bernie and casting light down. So play with these values just first with a spotlight. Change your point of interest. Try to get used to the position and move it around. Open the floodgates a little bit so that you're doing your cone angle wider, and change your feather. And just get a feel for its interactive element with what's going on. And then we'll take this a little bit further.